to Early Years Insights with me, Kathy Leatherbarrow. Today I have got Lisa Wallace with me. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's good. So your company is Intuitive Weaning.
Yeah.
All things food,
Yes.
weaning, development.
Yes.
Exciting area of development for lots of children and lots of early years practitioners and parents, but equally not an area particularly that gets much attention in terms of training and information for parents out there on, what's right, what's not right, what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. There is a bit on the NHS website. But like with lots of areas of child development, there's lots of random advice as well. There's no clear guidance really for parents, is there? Or on what weaning looks like and what it's a part of.
Doesn't seem to be any. I mean, you have the NHS guidelines, which are good, but they are guidelines.
Yeah.
They're not law or anything, which
No.
they kind of get a bit misunderstood, I think.
Yeah.
However, with parents, everything that they see now is more to drive anxiety and, unfortunately, fear and even worse, sales, especially on social media. The expectations that parents have on themselves. I mean, me as a mum of four, you have those expectations and you want to do the best for your child anyway. But even more so in the weaning journey, because there is that fear of choking and things like that, people are so worried about that possibly happening that the fear gets the better of them, and then they miss out on the other developmental milestones
that come along with
weaning. Because
it can be really, I think it can be really misleading for parents as well. Because if you walk into a supermarket and you look at that aisle, that's all the baby food, which I'm not sure now. I know a lot more about weaning myself, that I would actually knowingly give my child or the majority of that baby food. But even if you look at the labels of it, and it's like from 3-4 months. Now that just fills me with fear anyway at providing food for children that young.
Yeah, I think this is where it's a very controversial topic.
Yeah.
But with regards to starting a baby earlier has to be regulated in a way.
Absolutely.
Definitely sought after medical provisions and a professional from a medical background to get involved on that.
Absolutely.
I would definitely agree with that. With regards to the variety that is on the shelves, there is a place for it. There is a need for it in some sense. Some people struggle with either managing to do that through their own anxieties and offering those types of foods and things like that, as well as some lack education in how to cook foods for themselves.
Absolutely.
They don't do that naturally, so how do they do that best for the baby? So they go to the big companies that are supposed to do that. So there is a need for it. I do agree. There is, or something of that provision there is a need for. I wouldn't advise using it every single day, all day, for every meal. But then if that's the only way you're going to introduce any kind of variety or texture and progress that way safely, then it's kind of a thing I sit on the fence with, because if you don't progress through the textures, then you're going to harm other parts of the development through the oral development and speech and language. But if you feed just those kind of foods, again, you're not getting necessarily the nutrients for it.
Absolutely.
So it's two-edged, double-edged sword, really.
Yeah, and like you say, some parents rely on them thinking that they are providing children with a range of nutrients, aren't they, that way, when they've not got sometimes the best knowledge. It's a safe option, isn't it? That they believe that their child is getting a good balanced diet if they go along with them.
Exactly. And weaning has now become all about food, as in not all about what food creates. It's all about the nutritional value of food.
Yeah.
As much as that has its place and it's important, it's lost the meaning of what weaning is.
Yeah.
From my experience and my perspective, it is lost all the other sides of what the weaning journey is, and you've narrowed it down and just put it in this tiny little box, and you've just said it's just food, so it's got to be nutritional.
Yeah, absolutely. It can lead to better weaning though as well, can't it, in terms of, children's diet and palate can improve through it as well, can't it? And and you don't get this rigid set of foods that children will only eat or like. They're more open to trying new things as well if you explore and play through food as well.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
And the least amount of pressure that you add to it, because they experience food completely differently to how you think.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, I'm all about looking at it from a baby's perspective, not us trying to make it into an adult's perspective. And it's the same way. It's like people that I work with and support in early years. And one of the typical things I like to do is put them in the mindset of the baby. So, for example, if you imagine you close your eyes or you put a blindfold on or you do something like that and you can't see, and somebody hands you something, you're immediately going to be anxious. Doesn't matter how well you know that person or don't know that person. You're going to be anxious, apprehensive, worried, maybe scared, depending on whether this person likes you or not. And then you're going to hold your hands out, probably begrudgingly, and wait, and the anticipation. And then you're going to be given this object. And then your brain is going to be firing all over the place with neuropathways to figure out, is it wet, is it cold, is it warm, is it hot, is it rough, is it smooth, to figure out what it is, because you have reserves in your brain to work out what the options are, narrow it down, and whether it's safe. A baby, when you put them in a high chair, for example, at the first time, they've gone from being in a cosy lap or cuddling into someone, or even a cozy bouncy chair if they've done it that way, to a very, doesn't matter how you dress them up, every high chair has the same foundation as my head. It's hard, it's rigid, it's cold, it's uncomfortable, you're having to sit up and support yourself for longer. All of these things, and you're higher up and you can see different things. All of these through your senses are completely different to how you think. It's like, again, us going from these comfy chairs or the sofa to then going to sit in like the children's plastic school chairs. We're going to be moving around. We're probably going to stand up a bit sometimes, stretch our legs, all these different things. But we don't allow that from a baby's perspective. We just think, oh, you need nutrients, you need this. Let's give you a piece of broccoli.
It's a task and a chore almost, isn't it?
Exactly. It's so much more than food. And with parents and supporting parents, you have to understand what they're going through as well. And a little while ago, I was sharing a story with you about when I was a parent for my fourth, and I'd experienced going to a baby massage class I was really excited about, and I was talking to another parent who was on her second child, and we were conferring about our differences in weaning journeys and what we'd chosen, what choices we'd made, what we found now as they were getting older. When one of the tutor from the baby massage class overheard what we were saying and decided to interject their perspective, rather publicly and rather harshly, to the point that I left the massage class at the end feeling completely deflated, feeling so overwhelmed and questioning myself whether I'd poisoned my children, my older children, and whether I was going to make the right choices for my younger child. And that's with that many years experience in childcare already, on my fourth child, and I could feel like that.
Gosh.
I never wanted another parent to feel judged, ashamed, anxious, worried, scared, any of those, anything of what I was feeling at that point. So I was on a mission to, first of all, to start with the parents and helping them feel that they could open up, they could talk about their fears, they could see things from a fun perspective. We could take it back to basics, work with them, rather than just, here's a set of rules, go do.
Because there's not that much support for parents, is there, when it comes to weaning? You know you've got to do it at some point, but where do you begin? How do you start? Because I remember with my first child, I thought, right, we're going to do this. It's going to be fun. It's going to be healthy. It's going to be nutritious. You know, she's going to have a palate that'll, you know, that'll have anything and everything. And, you know, it's, you know, I was a mum on a mission. You know, it turns out, you know, quite a number of months down the line, you make that many mistakes, but it was fun, you know. I found myself making like a shepherd's pie for dinner, and she'd love it, but she'd only love it if I had pureed peach over the top of it. The child needed to be weaned off fruit. You know, and it was just because, you know, we'd explored fruit so much in early weaning. You know, it was just, she wouldn't then accept anything really of any other texture, or whether it was savoury, or unless there was pureed pear or peach or something naturally sweet on the top. And I was mortified that I'd allowed that to happen. I'm thinking, I'm an early years professional. Why have I gone so drastically wrong? And I saw it as wrong. And, you know, out of my two children, she has got the better palate now. However, I was really tough on myself that I'd made such a drastic error in her weaning journey early on, because she was addicted to fruit. And I was like, she's addicted to natural sugar. Oh my goodness, you know, and I was mortified, absolutely mortified. So then when it came to my second child, that poor little girl didn't get a piece of fruit for months. And it was broccoli, and it was sweet potato, and it, you know, it was just, she went into vegetable overload, bless her. But you know, and now when I look back, she's, out of the two, she's the one less likely to take a piece of fruit if she's, you know, she wants a snack. She'll go for chicken or something like that, which is fine. You know, I'm not, you know, but it just shows how influential as well those early weaning practices can be. But that doesn't mean to say that either way was right or wrong, is it?
Exactly.
And that's the key, isn't it?
Exactly that. It's that I am a big believer in there is no set way to wean a child. Yeah. Every baby, every parent is an individual as far as I'm concerned, and their weaning journey is nothing different. It's got to be individual, because what people don't take into consideration is the emotional aspect.
Absolutely.
The emotional connection that's made in a relationship to food, like you said, starts from when you start the weaning journey. And people don't realise how powerful that is. Parents they come into it with their childhood traumas of food. They have their thought processes of what they should be doing because so-and-so down the road was doing X, Y and Z, and my baby should be, you know, the same way as you are. If, oh, so-and-so's baby's sitting up now, mine should be. It's 2 weeks older than that one, you know. We all do it slightly as parents, but at the same time, it's also important to remember that you are building those connections and you're responsible for those. What they look like can be fantastic, magnificent, but we're never going to get it 100% right according to the next person, because it's what works for you works for you. Doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody else.
And I think it's really tough as well at the moment on the cost of living. That's, you know, that's a real, you know, contributing factor, I think, for weaning at the moment, isn't it? You know, the price of food has gone up so much. You know, parents are having to make some choices, aren't they, as well?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the things I talk about as well with parents is the fact of how easy it can be. So you don't have to, yes, it's great to give them all the variety of all the foods in the whole supermarket, in the whole world of every aisle. However, it's not always feasible.
No.
And is it going to have long-term effects? Probably not. Because unless it's consistent, they're not going to remember if they tried papaya at the age of 6.5 months when they're 2.5 years old.
No.
So it's those kind of things where it's got to be relative. So if your daily diet and you have regular meal times and you have dinners consist of, like you said, shepherd's pie, for example, So when you start with that, then break it down, just separate it if you want to. If you want to do the whole baby-led weaning side, then obviously you can do it slightly differently. But if you was going to do it from a puree perspective, as you spoke about pureed peaches, then you can do it like that. You just don't give them the added salt.
Yeah.
And everything else they can have, because the other misconception of people is that you can't have flavour if you can't have salt.
Yeah.
But no one said that. No. How boring is it to keep giving them the same bland food?
Yeah.
They're not going to then want spices or flavour as they get older. They're going to be more resistant.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying put teaspoons and tablespoons of chilli in things, but within reason.
And that's, I was reading some research a few months ago on allergies as well. There's some research out there at the moment that's saying, withdrawing certain types of foods like nuts and dairies and, can actually, exacerbate, allergies, and you can almost bring on an allergy by keeping those foods from a child's diet. We should, safely, we should be introducing these foods to children.
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah.
I think safe early exposure is really the best way, to be fair.
Yeah.
I've had and worked with some extremely anxious parents, especially when it comes to nut allergies, because everybody hears about the anaphylaxis and things like that. And
it is scary though.
It is,
isn't it?
exactly.
Yeah.
So things like that, I've sort of said to people, if they are that worried, then do it in the car park at your GP or do it in an A&E car park. Yeah. You haven't got far to go.
Yeah.
And you're in the safety of your car. No one's going to interfere unless you need it.
Yeah.
And not to do it. Some people were thinking they had to break down and ground out nuts and do various other things and give them spoonfuls of things. And I was like, no, you just literally have to put the tiniest bit on their lips. That's it. Yeah. And if they start to have reaction, you obviously remove it.
Yeah.
And then you seek medical advice depending on what you need. But there's another one with eggs as well. Someone was withholding the idea of giving eggs in their weaning journey because they had an egg allergy. So I spoke to them about that and I said, dependent on what the actual reaction is for you, which it wasn't a severe one, it wasn't a nice one, but it wasn't severe. I said I would just do it in small doses throughout and see if you have any kind of reaction, and always do it earlier on in the day than later in the day when they're sleeping. But definitely early exposure. Yeah,
it's important, isn't it? It's everybody, like you said before, everybody's individual, and that child will, although, will have a lot of traits from you as a parent, that, it's, what's safe for them will be very different, isn't it? And, unless it's, unsafe for you to have such foods within your home, then you should really try to expose your children to a variety.
Exactly.
A variety of different foods.
Exactly. The same way as people also seem to think that the weaning journey ends after they've got their 3 meals down and they're doing that. No, the journey of food still continues.
Yeah. Mine's still continuing.
You just have to offer a different variety or put something else out. But it's down to that not having that pressure around it. As soon as you put pressure in it with the best intention even, you're going to lose that interest.
Yeah. And I'd say it continues for so many years afterwards as well, doesn't it? Because if I just reflect on my 2 children now, they're in their late teens now, but their palate is still changing, still adapting, they're introducing new foods themselves naturally still, and trying new foods, and suddenly, I like this now because they've tried it again since, and they're doing it more naturally as they get older, but it still continues, doesn't it? It's
very much so.
And like my youngest, she loved gnawing on corn on the cob when she was little. At the moment, if I put some in front of her, it'd be, what are you giving me that for? I don't like it. Why don't you like it? You did. Look, here's the photograph,
Yeah.
But, it just changes all the time, doesn't it? Because, Yeah, I think even as adults, we can retrain ourselves, can't we, to like more foods.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
and
know.
the same way with, again, the sensory side that people
Yeah.
don't talk about, and the sensory journey you can go on.
Mhm.
And for example, like you say about your children, my youngest is 11, and obviously she had too much of a variety as she was growing up, because now every time I have a new food that I like, it ends up being her food.
New food.
No, just her food at that point. I thought that stopped when they were toddlers, but clearly mine never grew out of it. But I do like that, and I appreciate it, because so many people don't. But at the same time, you may like some textures at some point, and you may not at other times in your life. Or those textures can link to connections, emotional connections. And there's such a wiring throughout, not only development, but also in the whole body, in the whole being of a person through food. It's so connected that it is so important just to let them keep going and not to constrict it as they get older.
And I think that's it, isn't it? It's about, not giving yourself the pressure of, they've got to eat X amount throughout the day, and see it more of an opportunity, a new opportunity, a new activity. There's so much more development that goes on while you're weaning and while children are eating and exploring food, that, I think people are unaware of that, aren't they? They're more at task and driven, and the fact that my child needs to eat, has to have 3 meals a day, 2 snacks preferably, and it's a chore, it's a task, and that's got to be complete and great if it's nutritious and balanced. However, there's so many more developmental milestones happening while children explore food, isn't there? Just about if you think about the language that you use with your child when you're talking and introducing food and describing food and introducing that rich vocabulary, and that's just language development while you're weaning, isn't it? If you look at sensory development, and how things feel and what happens, it's not just food, is it? That's new, that's fueling their bodies. There's so much more that's going on as well.
Exactly that. I mean, I know this will horrify some people when I say this, but there's some children that don't like experiencing things first with their fingers.
Yeah.
But they don't not want to experience it. They just don't want to experience it with their fingers. So if you allow them to experience it with their feet, it's a whole different story. Yet they have the same sensory input. So because they've touched it with their feet, they're more likely to touch it with their hands.
Yeah.
Not that I'm advising anybody to feed their child from their feet. Might I just preference that here? But in the sense that if you have textures and things like that, years ago I started the first ever completely edible messy play sessions for parents and babies, where it was literally completely food, and I made like full-on edible sandpits and edible gardens and everything, and I loved it. I just closed it down in COVID because I wanted people to be able to move from one tough spot to another tough spot to another one, rather than having the restrictions so much. So anyway, the amount of people that would come to me, parents would be falling apart, not knowing where to start, or other ones would be, oh, well, she used to eat brilliantly and now she won't touch anything. And they'd have this battle with their child for like 2 months. I said, okay, bring them down to a session. And she brought her down, and I said, okay, I did different themes each week. And so Tesco's was like my haven. It was like my soft play to me. However, so I had sandpit out, and I said, and flat bottom cornets make sandcastles. So, so anyway, I got her to put her in there. And I said, just sit down. They were stripped off, by the way, to their nappies, so they were experiencing it every which way they could. So she sat her in the sand, and edible sand. And I was talking to her mum, and I was sitting right next to the tough spot with her mum next to me. And I said, just talk to me about anything. It doesn't have to be about what's going on, but just talk to me. Just take your attention away from her for a minute. Now, I could see that she was in eye shot on a little bit further than arm reach to the cornets, but she could feel the sand on her feet.
Yeah.
So I was watching her out the corner of my eye, as was her mum, and I had another assistant as well watching. However, we tried to sort of see her very subtly, so she didn't see that we had our eye on her. And I was talking to the parent about what was going on, how she was feeling about it, and all these kind of things. And her daughter then reached forward, and I could see in the corner of my eye what she was going to do. She was going to go for the cornets. And I was like, right, I'm not going to say anything. So I carried on the conversation with the parent, and I watched. And she did. She went to the corner, and she looked around, and then she came back. And she went for it again, looked around, and came back. And the third time, she got it, and she brought it to herself. And then she started playing with the sand and interacting with that and picking things up, because I'd already checked that she didn't have any physical issues with regards to being able to actually pick things up and put them to her mouth. And I then showed the mum. I said, look, she hasn't got any issues with it. It's just she needed to relax and enjoy it again, rather than having it all just being about food consumption. And she went through every single tough spot afterwards, and she was in her element, this little child. You wouldn't have believed that she came in and wouldn't touch anything. She was the child that's covered the most in everything. Luckily, I provided baths at the end. But yes, it just shows you, though, people get so anxious about one particular thing and focus on that. And the fact that they're not eating enough, or they're not doing it this way, how it can transpire. And if that hadn't have had that intervention, you would have been a whole different ball game as they went into toddler age.
Yeah. So how do you feel that, like, nurseries help with weaning? Do you feel like in early years we do enough with weaning and what it can look like, rather than it being a chore and a task?
I think all the early years practitioners that I've worked with and had the pleasure of working with or under and speak to regularly in all different positions. And I think everybody I speak to is so passionate and so love what they do. And that shines through massively. There is, though, from talking to various different managers and things like that, there is a lack of consistency throughout the team, because there's a knowledge gap. I feel there's a knowledge gap.
Yeah, absolutely.
My perspective, there is, as early years, professional myself as well, you only get taught the bare minimum, from what I look at it, the bare minimum of equivalent of a short CPD course, or maybe you might have an afternoon of an hour or something, or if you just come from college or something like that, you might have, I don't know, an hour session on it again, with the tutor just describing. It will be the readiness signs, and it'll be like, okay, well, you'll learn about choking and gagging through your first aid, but here's a sort of template. And then these are the foods we'd recommend you start with. And then if you're lucky, again, some ways of presenting it.
Yeah.
That would be it. And it's become about the consumption. And nurseries and settings like that have obviously restrictive time frames to do certain things in, as much as they would quite happily play with the kids all day with food, and I'm sure. But they do have time frames for it. And that restriction, but there is ways of assessing settings so that you can make sure that you've used all the opportunities you can to strengthen that practice.
There's a lot of settings put a lot of time and effort, don't they, into planning a nutritious menu for children. And that you quite often see that it's organic now, that they're having their 5, 6, 7 a day. It's well balanced. There's healthy proteins in there and carbohydrates. There's a lot of time and effort going into that planning of the menu, isn't there? And I see all that, and it's great. It's wonderful, and as a parent, that's very reassuring. But then I look at the youngest in those settings, and again, lots of time and thought in the same way that has been put into that. But are they really getting the opportunities to experience weaning fully?
Yeah.
You know,
It's also
and
the parents as
embrace
well.
sort of the love and exploration of food, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And so many parents now as well, especially with social media being such a big influence and no one having any in-depth training about weaning and how pivotal it is to the whole development of the child. And just consciously commenting on the fact of the nutritional side is brilliant, and that is what you need. But there's so much more to it.
Yeah.
So where people don't have that knowledge, they can't then support the parents to make the right decisions or to feel supported and almost nurtured somewhat sometimes, or have those conversations that are going to lead them into a positive way of thinking. For example, some of the settings I've spoken to recently have had children that the parents aren't happy for them to progress from purees through textures because they're so fearful of the choking incident.
Yeah.
But then they're also going to struggle when it comes to the speech and language because the oral development isn't there. However, if early years practitioners have that in-depth knowledge on all the levels, they can then not only observe that child and see where the strengths and weaknesses are, to know for the next steps, to know what to observe, to be able to reassure that parent that they may be at 6 months, but they may not be ready. And it's acknowledging that they might not be ready still. And if they aren't, then you need to have the knowledge to back that up to a parent. And a lot of settings don't have the knowledge, the specialist training in it to be able to share that knowledge with a parent. And therefore the parent partnership becomes quite split.
Yeah, it becomes fractured, doesn't it?
It does.
Because then it's...
And there's a lack of consistency between the home and nursery, and then that can consist and continue later on as well. And lots of early years practitioners I've been speaking to, managers have admittedly said like their staff do struggle with talking to parents and the language they use as well. So something they might record nowadays, it used to be pen and paper back in my days years ago, but you use like the apps and things like that.
Now,
and like family and things like that. And they may be reporting whatever on them so that obviously the parents can see them. But if they put something down like, oh, barely touched the food or only ate a spoonful, that parent, depending on what type of parent they are, that parent could go away and go, oh my gosh, they've only eaten a spoonful. That means they're already down this much on their food intake, and that means I've got to do this when I get home, and I've got to do that, and and all these worries, all these anxieties come flooding forward. And then when they turn up to pick the child up, they're already anxious. They're already putting that emotional connection is now between them and that child. And then that negatively inputs when they get home as well. And then everything else they've got feelings
and
in
then
it
it
and such.
impacts heavily their restful night that night, which parents long for, don't they? You know, and it's sleep's a big thing as well, isn't it? That, you know, partners with that too.
Exactly. It is so hard to get the partnership connected with parents and for them to trust you with their wholeheartedly, with their most precious being, really. That you work so hard at that, but then with the partnership side, especially on the weaning side, is the fact that you could use language like, he learnt where the broccoli bounced today, or he splatted and made a picture with potato, or he or she saw whether they could use peas as hairspray, or all these different fun things you can do as anecdotes where parents don't see it as they have to worry about anything. Oh, that's funny. Oh, isn't that cute? They might not see the cute side when they pick them up and they're covered in everything and they've got to clean their clothes. But at that point, it doesn't give that anxiety. It takes that away. So then they're so much more approachable, so much more warm and just relaxed. And then it's so much easier for the earlier years practitioners as well to actually support that child and that parent in whatever's the next journey.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for joining me today. It's been lovely to talk lots about food and weaning and exploration with food, and it's, you know, being much more than nutrition. So thank you. And we'll look forward to speaking to you maybe again soon.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.